Hello everyone and welcome to session number 5 of the VAT Proficiency webinars. Today we're going to be looking at the VAT verification settings. So we're going to learn about all the different settings and what they mean and find out which ones are relevant to your business. My name is Abby and I'm going to be your host for this afternoon. We also have Michael and Matt on hand today to answer your questions throughout the session. I'm sure there will be plenty as it's quite a busy session. So the session's going to last around 30 minutes. We may need that full time, we may not. Just depends on how many questions we get towards the end as well. Before we start the session, just want to cover a little bit of housekeeping. So what you will see is that you will be placed on mute when you join. If you do have any questions, however, you can use the questions panel down the right-hand side of your screen by clicking the option that looks like a little speech bubble with the question mark in the middle. This is then going to open up that panel and you can send your questions across to me, Michael and Matt to answer them for you. We do also have a handout for today. You can click the icon that looks like a little document with a folded corner. There is the normal version and there's also a printer-friendly version available for you as well. I also recommend that you do download this as it will have some helpful links to our help centre. Okay, so just a little bit of a recap, just on the VAT Proficiency badge for 2025. So we've got 7 sessions in total and a quiz at the end. You do need to attend 5 of the 7 live sessions and the quiz to receive the digital badge for VAT Proficiency. Now, you don't need to, do very well at the quiz. You don't need to get any, all the answers right. It's just a case of your live attendance will count towards that badge. So like I say, we've got another 2 sessions after this. So we've got running reports for confident reconciliation and session 7, which is correcting VAT transactions. But today we're going to be focusing on exploring the VAT verification checks. Okay, so this is what we're going to be covering today. So we are going to be covering, what are the VAT verification checks and what do they mean? We will look at the settings and how you can deselect the ones that are not relevant to your business. We'll also talk about the results given by the checks, and then briefly talk about the VAT audit option towards the end as well. And then, like I say, do pop your questions throughout the session, but like I say, we will, like you say, see if there's anything that needs to be picked up towards the end. So let's get started with what are the VAT verification checks. So when you calculate your VAT return, it will run some verification checks and it'll just help you check your data before you submit to HMRC or ROS if you're in Ireland. You can review the results of these checks and make amendments if they are required, but that's the key part, if they are required. And you can make them before submitting to HMRC. Now there are 8 checks by default, and they are all switched on as default as well. We do always recommend to leave them switched on initially until you start to work out which ones work for you and your business and your type of processing. Then once you know which ones are maybe not working for you, you can start to switch those off. Now, one key thing I want to mention is that these checks don't always indicate that something is wrong. They're highlighting something that maybe needs your attention and wants you to double check before, like I say, before submitting. But again, it's not always an indicator that something is incorrect, sorry. So just bear that in mind. Now, before we go into the demonstration today, the question we often get on VAT is, well, what's the difference for Ireland? So the verification settings is exactly the same. The only difference is that the VAT rates and tax code in the bottom section will be different. So you've got your left, which is the UK, which is what you're going to see in the demonstration today. Then on the right, you've got the Republic of Ireland. So you can see highlighted in the boxes, instead of 21 and 18, it's 24 and 21. And the tax code is still T1, but the rate is slightly higher. So that's the difference. The only difference that you'll see today is just the rates on the verification settings. But let's get straight stuck in with the demonstration. Okay, so there's two ways in which you can find the settings that we're going to be looking at today. So the first way you can go is you could go into settings, company preferences. We'll just log in there. And then we'll go to the VAT tab. And then at the very bottom, you've got the verification settings here. So you pop into here, and this is the window that we're going to be looking at today. So first of all, we've got the identify possible duplicate transactions. So any transactions which look identical in the software. So now in some businesses, that may be something very odd that you wouldn't have on a regular basis. But then other businesses, you might have lots of duplicate transactions. So you might work on a subscription basis where all of the posting details are very similar. So this one is where it may work for some businesses, and for others it might highlight every single transaction that they've posted. It'll show which ones it thinks are duplicates when you come to do the checks, so then you can pay attention to those ones that may be incorrect and make any relevant corrections. So next we've got the missing entries section. So the first one is identify invoices or credits which have not been updated. So the next one is, this one is when we're using the invoices and credits module. You need to update them to the ledger for the invoice to show on the customer record. Now, if that's the case, it means that those invoices aren't impacting our customer records, they're not impacting our nominal records, and therefore not impacting our VAT return. It relies on that SI transaction to be created in the transactions list, and that won't happen until it's been updated to the ledger. In the past, we have seen this, and it's normally where maybe businesses have been trying out the module, they've tried a couple of invoices and credits, and they're not quite sure yet. Maybe it's not ready to commit, so they haven't updated them to the ledger. So it could be that you just need to go in and find those invoices and then delete those invoices from invoices and credits. If it's a genuine invoice and it hasn't been updated, then you would need to investigate why. Is it that it's just been missed out and we need to go in and update it? Or is there something stopping that invoice? Maybe it's on hold for some reason. The next one down, we've got purchase orders which have been delivered but not yet invoiced. So this is only if you're using the purchase order module, which you will only have access to if you are using the professional variant of the software. So if you've had a purchase on order that you've marked as delivered, you're saying that you've received the goods, but you haven't popped in the invoice yet. Now that could be genuine. It could be that you've not received the invoice from your supplier, in which case you probably wouldn't need to chase them for it. Or it could be that it hasn't yet been processed. It could be sitting in a pile waiting to be processed into the software. So again, it gives you things that you need to start investigating. So next, we've got identify transactions with a VAT value where the tax code is not included in the VAT return. So this one normally indicates that something is wrong. This is where you've got a transaction with the VAT value where the tax code isn't included on the VAT return. So typical tax codes that we're talking about is usually T9, which is your non-VATable tax code. You tend to use T9 on your journals, but there could be instances, for example, a new starter has entered an invoice, a payment or receipt, and they have used the T9 tax code, but then manually entered the VAT value. Next section is other potential issues. So the first one is check VAT valued on transactions for errors. So within this section, it's talking about the rates. So it's identifying where the rate is higher than 21% or lower than 18% if you are on standard VAT. And as I mentioned earlier, if you are based in Ireland, then your rates will be slightly different depending on your VAT scheme. So for an example, what it might flag transaction is when a supplier invoice doesn't give you a full VAT breakdown. Now that full VAT value may be split into standard 20%, but part may be zero rated. But they just give you an overall value. The reason this flag is because we should be processing one transaction per tax code. So you need to take that into consideration. If you do process them as one transaction, it is going to flag them on the verification checks. The next one down, so just under the rates here, so most common tax code. So this option does only give you the one tax code to choose from, but most businesses will use more than one. So as default, this option will be set as T1, but if your most commonly used tax code is not T1, then we would suggest changing it to the relevant one. However, don't be surprised if transactions still get flagged, as it is just going to be down to the fact that you can only select one in the settings and you'll be using more than one. The next one is identify journal transactions where the tax code is not selected as non-VATable. So there may be instances where we have recommended you post a journal entry to reflect disposal of fixed assets and you use a VATable tax code, so for example T1. However, 9 times out of 10, when you post a journal, you will use T9 non-VATable tax code. So any occasion where you might have had to use a different tax code, it will flag it up when you do the checks, but it's always best to check just in case it has been changed in error. And then lastly, in this section, we've just got identify possible incorrect EC transactions. Now we are post-Brexit, so we no longer use those tax codes, so it is no longer looking for the incorrect VAT rates. So if you are going to switch any of these options off, it's most likely going to be this one as it's no longer relevant. Okay, so that is the VAT verification settings with the option to disable the irrelevant ones if necessary. So once you're happy with those settings, you can then proceed to calculate your figures in the software. So we'll pop into VAT. We'll click on VAT return. Please make sure that you're always doing a backup before you calculate your VAT return. Very important, because if you accidentally reconcile, it's not something that you can undo, and you will need to restore to, you do need to restore to a backup. So always make sure when you're coming into your VAT return, even if you're just doing a calculation, making sure you're using the backup option here. Now I've already taken one today, so I know that my data is backed up. We are going to run just for these dates that we've already got in the software. The other place that I mentioned where you can also change your VAT verification settings is in the first step here. You've got the settings, which brings up the same window. So that's the two places that you can access it. So you can go to settings, company preferences, into the VAT tab, or you can come into the VAT return and then use the settings option here. So we're going to click on calculate VAT return, just so it calculates our figures. And then the only place we're focusing on today's session is the verification results. And this is the top section here. It's got that little warning sign to tell me that I've got some results to view. So we'll click on view results. And we can see we've got some entries in each of the areas. So we'll just go back into each section. So the first one we'll go into is for possible duplicate transactions. So we'll click on View. It's going to bring up these transactions. Now, you might only have a couple like me, or you may have a big list of transactions. You do have the option to print or send to Excel as well. If it's going to help you, do your checks, you might want to do that. What I am going to say is that if you are going to do all your checks and you need to make changes, do all of your checks first, because you will have to come out of the VAT return to make any changes to your transactions. So go through each of the checks, make a note of any transaction numbers that you might need to investigate, because you will need to go back, come out of the VAT return to do that. And then you will need to recalculate once you've made those changes. So as you can see, these transactions here appear to be possible duplicates, because they're the same transaction type, account reference, we've got the same nominal code, same value, and same amount. So like I said before, if you're using something like a cash sales account, you're doing a lot of similar transactions, this could be the majority of your transactions. So you might think, well, this check doesn't work for you, then deselect this option. However, if these are genuine transactions and they just happen to be pretty much the same, you simply just ignore. You don't have to click anything to confirm they're ignored. You just simply close out and just move on to the next section. So the next one we've got is possible missing entries. So the first one is invoices and credits which have not yet been updated. So we click in View. So in here, it's going to give me the invoice number on the left. It's going to give me the account reference. So it could be, that these invoices haven't been, so basically what it is these invoices have not been updated to the ledgers. So there isn't an SI transaction that has hit the customer record as of yet. So that is something that we would need to check. So it could be that these could be test invoices. We've been playing around with the invoices and credits module. You don't actually need them, so you can go in and delete them. If it is one that that isn't a test, it is genuine, you do need to go and do your checks. Make a note of the invoice numbers, do your checks. If they need updating to the ledgers, update them. If they don't, again, just simply ignore. And then take the relevant action needed. Again, don't forget you can print these to Excel. If you want to make a long list of everything that is, that do need investigating, you can also do that. Next, we've got the purchase orders, which have been delivered but not yet invoiced. Now, quite a lot of users who utilize the purchase order module do not necessarily update the ledger to the ledger to create the invoice, and may just create it manually using the batch invoice option within suppliers module. So in this case, most purchase orders are going to show as not updated to the ledger, which then result in showing in this check. If that is the case, then you can just ignore the check and continue. If you do update the purchase order to the ledger, it may be that it's on your list to invoice already, could have been missed, or you need to chase that invoice with that supplier. And the last one in this section is all about the VAT value, where the tax code is not included on the return. So we'll click on View. So this one I said normally indicates that something is wrong. So what we have is some transactions here. It's got the net amount in the boxes here. It's got the tax amount here. However, it's on a T9 tax code, which is a non-VATable. So that can't have a VAT value. And that transaction shouldn't be showing on your VAT return well, it won't show on your VAT return, but you might need it to show on your VAT return because you can see it's got the standard rate against those transactions. So it could be that these could be a new starter and the incorrect tax code. So that's worth investigating. Okay, so the next one is 4 transactions with an unexpected VAT value. So this one is relating to the percentages that we were looking at in the settings. So that's where it's going to flag anything outside the 21% and the 18%, obviously the different ones for Ireland. So what it's done is it's checked all my transactions, it's looked at the net amount. The software automatically estimates what the tax should be, given that it's T1, so it calculates based on the standard rate. But unfortunately, these transactions have come through with different tax values. So you can see, some of them are quite high. Don't reflect what the tax code usually calculates. So this is where you'll need to do an investigation. There could be, the what I mentioned before, where the part of the invoice was 0 rated and the rest was actually standard rated. So it could be that this invoice would be split into 2 separate transactions. But again, this is where you would do your investigation. Next, we've got the sales and purchase transactions not using your most commonly used tax code. So this one is always going to come up. You'll find something in here because you're going to process transactions on different tax codes. And because T1 is set as my most common, but I can be using T9s, for example, if I'm, if I'm doing journals and things like that. So because if you use like different tax codes, it's going to flag them up regardless. So don't be surprised if you are finding transactions in here. Always check them, but don't be surprised if you do find them in there. Then the last one we're going to look at in here is 2 journal transactions where the tax code is not selected is not VATable. So you can see here I've got a journal here, and you can see it's on a T1 tax code. So 9 times out of 10, your journals are going to be T9, which will not flag up in this particular section. So it could be, for example, that you needed to sell an asset, such as a car, and following all the steps that Sage provided, using the articles, you need to show the net amount and the tax amount on the journal, so it could be flagged on the VAT return, and that's why a T1 tax code might be used on a journal. So in this case, it would be correct, so then I can close and just continue and ignore that particular one. Question coming there from Liz. So I'm confused what happens with sales that are entered in Sage by journal rather than using the sales ledger. Will they appear when running under the missing entries section? So because it doesn't, these are picking up specific transactions. So for example, these ones, this first one here, the invoices and credits, this is they're not going to, these, if you're using journals for your sales, they're not going to show up in here because this particular search result is looking for SI transactions, whereas you're using journal credits and journal debits, so it's not going to flag up in the missing entries section. If you're not using invoices and credits, so you haven't got any invoices and credits posted that module, it's not going to show up anyways because you haven't got invoices sitting there not updating to the ledgers. Depends on how you processing in your software. Okay, so that is the verification checks and the verification summary. Like I say, it's asking you to double check these figures. so that you can be confident with what you're going to be submitting to HMRC or ROS if you're in Ireland. So there's not necessarily going to be always something wrong when you with this process and transactions are flagged. But it does give you the opportunity to double check before proceeding and reconciling. But just a reminder, you must come out of the VAT return to make any changes, as the figures will need to be recalculated. Okay, so I'm just going to pop back to my slides. So the last bit I just want to mention before we wrap the session up is that you have also got the VAT audit option, which also can be used. And to save you having to calculate the VAT return to get those verification results, you can also pop into the transactions module, the VAT module, and along the top you'll see VAT audit and then the tax audit, the values audit option as well. So these present very similar options, not exactly the same, but very similar options, just slightly worded differently. But it just saves you going in. If your VAT return might take some time to calculate, you just want a quick check, you can pop into this option as well. Okay, so to summarize the session, these checks are optional. Checks can be switched off if not relevant to your data. So as Liz was asking those questions there regarding to using invoices or importing the sales as journals, you could then turn off those checks whether looking at the sales and purchase ledgers as well. So you could turn those off if it's not relevant to you. Any transactions identified by the verification checks can be investigated prior to submission, but again, you do need to come out of that VAT window to do your changes. Checks do not indicate that a transaction is wrong, just a transaction which requires a bit more attention. And lastly, you've also got the VAT audit option that can be run at any time to help investigate transactions. A little quick question or a mention from Alison there, just about mentioning about people, like other users can't be in when you're doing anything to do with VAT. Really helpful article I just want to quickly show you is called Exclusive Program Areas, and this will help you identify where people can be or what people can be doing when you are doing certain areas of the program. So exclusive program areas means that users have to be logged out when you are completing any areas of the of the software. So it could be clear audit trail, year end, month end, things like that. So just a little really helpful guide you might want to favorite in terms of if you're unsure whether a user needs to be logged out. So again, all I typed in there was exclusive program areas to get that list up. Just one more question that came in from Liz again. So what checks would be relevant for JC and JD types? So if I just pop back to my software. So the only one that's probably going to be relevant to journals is going to be this one here. So journal transactions where the tax code is not selected, is not compatible. All your transactions will potentially show in this one here. So you're probably going to have to check that one to make sure that all your journals have been processed correctly if that is the way that you are processing in the software. But again, you can print it, you can send it to Excel, to make it a little bit easier to sift through if there's a lot of transactions. Okay, so pop back to my slides and I'll wrap up the session. So just a reminder about the VAT Proficiency badge. So you do have to attend 5 of the 7 live sessions and the quiz as well to be able to receive your digital badge. Now, you have to be patient with us getting those badges out as well. You will receive those in due course, so just keep an eye out for that as well. Okay, so we'll end there nicely. So all the questions seem to have been answered. So what I'll do is I'll wrap this session up. You will receive a survey at the end or upon exiting the session. You will see a survey at the end. If you could please pop any comments on there, long comments, short comments, anything is really appreciated. And I do like to read every single comment on there. What you liked about the session, what I could have done better, what would you have liked to have seen, do pop a comment on there for me. I want to say thank you to Michael and Matt, who's been on hand today to answer your questions, and thank you to you all for your participation today as well. Just a reminder, we've got plenty of sessions over the next couple of weeks, so don't be shy and get registered. So I want to say another thank you and take care.